Your book calls for a return to principles that made America great, made America successful. What do you think those principles are, and how do we reconnect with those principles in a practical way?
I think the principal documents of this country, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, are probably the greatest political documents that ever have been written by anybody. And I think the only thing that's wrong with this country is that we've strayed from the principles that are in those documents. And I would suggest that the biggest straying is the system was meant to be set up to be fair for everybody. I think most Americans do not want handouts. Most Americans, all they want is a fair deal and a fair shake. I mean, we are a smart, aggressive, hardworking people in general. We recognize unfairness when it exists. And sadly, the people in power and a lot of other folks have figured out ways to make the system unfair.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci, and joining us today is Lawrence Lepard. He's an investment manager, and now he's a best-selling author, exceptional book. The title of the book is The Big Print: What Happened to America and How Sound Money Will Fix It. But before we go into what happened to America, thank you for showing the book. And by the way, I would be showing the book right now, but my book is in my office.
That's all right.
And I'm home. But in any event, Larry, great to have you on. Before we get into the book, I wanted to talk about your background, if you don't mind. So
sure.
Give us what you did. You told me you were a paper boy, growing up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Take us through your career, because I think it's
I'll do it quickly, and the book lays a lot of this out. And I did that just to try and establish credibility, that I'm not just some financial nut job. So look, I went to college. I thought I would be an engineer, but I didn't decide to do that. I went more economics, and then I realized I wanted to be in business. I read some of the stuff by Warren Buffett, and I thought, boy, that's what I want to do. I want to figure stuff out and make good investments. And so I went to Wall Street for a couple of years, enjoyed that. Then I went to business school for a couple of years, enjoyed that. And I got in the investment business, and I was fortunate enough at the time. My father was kind of forward thinking, and he said, if I were you, it was like the plastics comment from The Graduate. He said, Larry, if I were you, I'd get involved with this microprocessor stuff. I think it's going to be big. And so I focused on technology investing from the early 80s until really 2006 or 7. And kind of, disk drives, floppy drives, graphics card, all the stuff that PC as it grew up. And then, the internet was probably my biggest area of success, because I was able to identify it in 93, got involved in some of those companies. They did well. And then in 2003, 4, 5, I kind of semi-retired. I spent a lot of time with my kids. I thought that was more important. And then of course, what happened is the GFC came along. And I was just shocked. I don't know where you were or what your reaction to it was when it happened, but it was just like, hang on a second. You mean to tell me they can take interest rates to zero and print trillions of dollars? Oh my goodness. We're going to have hyperinflation, which I was wrong about, dead ass wrong about. But the trend was set in motion. And so I kind of pivoted to sound money. And I realized at that time that, the government was broken, the Federal Reserve was broken, and monetary debasement was going to be a theme that would play itself out in the future. And so I became kind of not an expert, but I read up a lot on monetary debasement. I read all the Austrians, and I kind of realized that, this Keynesian model is just broken. These guys aren't thinking right. So I pivoted into this area, and it's been a rocky ride, because as anyone who's invested in gold and gold stocks knows, this stuff's been volatile, and we haven't been winning all the time. We've had moments where we're winning, but it's been tough. And I have to say, I'm very, very encouraged that Bitcoin came along, because it brought in a whole new category of young people who read Austrian economics, who get it. And what gold tried to do to the Keynesian fiat system, I think Bitcoin's going to do, which is to say we're going to kill it. So and the book is great. That's why I have a lot of young listeners. And so just what Larry's talking about with Austrian economics, basically, it's very simplistic what I'm about to say, but there's a group of people that believe that hard money causes more fiscal prudence, causes more rational decision-making, and is better for lower and middle-class living standards. The Keynesian system that we're going to discuss in a second is about printing money and is about creating lots of deficit spending, which does have, in the Keynesian view, a smoothing effect on recessions. But what it really does, in my opinion, and evident from your book, your opinion, it kicks the can down the road and creates this used nuclear bomb that goes off
that
Correct.
causes
I mean,
this
it's
causes this reckoning. So we're both in the same camp philosophically, but I want to get to that.
yeah.
So you talked about the money printing. Money printing's happened a lot. You've talked about past monetary collapses, Weimar, Rome, Zimbabwe. I do tell people, Larry, that I am a billionaire, but only in Zimbabwe, where it costs like $10 billion
I am too.
to
In fact,
right to
you're,
right
you're
right.
gonna really like this. Check this out.
Yeah,
I've got
exactly. I got
a
one of those. I got one of
I've
those
got
in
a
my wallet.
$10 trillion Zimbabwe note. I keep it stapled to my wall to remind me.
Right, exactly. So you're a trillionaire. I think
Yeah.
by that definition, I am too. Tell us a little bit about these monetary collapses that happen in the systems that print money, weaken the currency, weaken the confidence in the consumer and the laborer, weaken
Yeah. I mean,
everybody because
I'll try
you
to.
can't catch up. You can't catch up because the money's worth less. You're
Yeah.
making it here, and they're stealing your time and your labor
Yeah. I mean,
at the same time.
and the book lays this out in excruciating detail. Perhaps too much detail for some. You can skip some of the technical chapters, but the bottom line is what's happened here is the government and the Keynesians and the bankers and the financiers have kind of colluded, and they've set up a system they say we need in order to smooth out business cycles, which is not true. And the solution to smoothing out those business cycles is to print money. And every crisis that occurs, the solution is they have one really tool, and that's the money printer, and they print money. And that's just like pouring water in the beer. The beer gets, it's diluted, it's not as valuable, and that's why we all pay higher prices. And so what's unfair about that is that, as in the 2008 example, let's just look at that as kind of the first big one that shocked me. The bankers created a huge credit bubble as a result of very low interest rates that Bernanke had put in place. And when that bubble burst, no banker went to jail. There was no penalty for what they did, and they were all technically bankrupt. So, they got bailed out, and a year later they paid $20 billion of bonuses to themselves. And the people that bailed them out were the taxpayers and all the rest of us. And I remember at the time it created great anger in the country. I mean, we had, as your book, presently pointed out, Occupy Wall Street and some other movements, the Tea Party movement were a result of that. But we really haven't solved that problem. That problem still exists. I mean, we bailed out Silicon Valley Bank. When COVID came along and the basis trade blew up, we bailed out Ken Griffin. And, it's what the financial elites and what the government have figured out a way to do is they kind of hold a gun to our head and say, hey, things have gone wrong. You got to print the money. They get bailed out. And if you don't do that, we're going to put a bullet through your head, or we're going to make sure the ATMs don't work. I mean, that's what, Paulson was down begging Nancy Pelosi for the $700 billion of TARP. He said, if you don't give this to me, the economy is going to fall apart. And so that's always their excuse. And we shouldn't have an economy that's so fragile that we have to pay for their mistakes. And, people wonder, I mean, as you know, a lot of people on the far, the far left say, well, it's greedy corporations that are causing inflation. No, that's not true at all. Supermarkets have very thin profit margins. What's causing inflation is the misbehavior of our government system. And it really does need to be reformed in a big way. And the book talks about that problem, and then it talks about how to solve it. And then there's even a chapter called Policy Response, where I drafted the speech I think the president should give. And we can get out of this mess. I mean, it's not great, but it's not unsolvable. And so the book is pessimistic about what's happened, but very optimistic about where we're going. And I know you're optimistic about it because Bitcoin is really changing the whole thing.
It would
right?
be hard not to be optimistic given everything you and I both know about progress and innovation and technology. And
exactly.
it's still the land of aspirational opportunity for many. But what role would Bitcoin have in all this? Tell us, Lo.
Well, Bitcoin is such an important development, and Saylor and you both did a great job with your book in talking about that. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years, every form of money has been dilutable, which is to say that it can be printed or even more of it can be found. And, before Bitcoin came along, the one form of money that was mildly dilutable was gold. The supply of gold grows every year as we mine more. So, in 50 years, the amount of gold on the planet will double. But having said that, most systems, and we're not even on a gold standard today, we're on fiat standards, and fiat is just continually being diluted. And the fact that there's a 21 million unit hard cap on Bitcoin, we now have a form of money with zero dilution. That's a completely different world than the world that we lived in pre-Bitcoin. I mean, it's like I try and compare it to, ancients. If ancients saw an airplane flying today, they'd say, how is that possible? What is that? It's just a technological innovation that did not exist. There was no way. We've never had a perfectly inelastic commodity, which is to say something where if the price goes up, the supply doesn't change. I can guarantee you if the price of gold goes much, much higher, we're going to mine a lot more gold. But if the price of Bitcoin goes to $1 million, there's still the same amount of Bitcoin. And therefore, that's what led Michael to make his statement, which I just love, which it's going up forever, Laura. And people have to kind of get their head around that. And it's hard to get your head around it. It really is. I know a lot of people who bought it, made money on it, and say, oh gosh, it's got to be near a peak. I'm selling it. and it's one of those assets you just don't sell, in my view.
Well, we've all had those frustrating checkout moments. Maybe the store only takes cash or the system is running slow and you're waiting. It's annoying. And in a city like New York, it just doesn't work. That's why it's such a relief to see so many local businesses using Square. You pull out your phone, you pay in a few seconds, and you get on with your day. It's fast, it's easy, and it just works. What I really like about Square is the flexibility. On the weekends, I'm out with my kids grabbing lunch from a food truck. It's there during the week. I see it at restaurants, retail shops, even online. It fits right in wherever you are. And from a business perspective, Square is built to grow with you. Whether you're just starting out or expanding to your next location, it's simple to set up, it's easy to use, and you can start taking payments right away. No special training, no hassles. Square keeps up so you don't have to slow down. Get everything you need to run and grow your business without any long-term commitments. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/openbook. That's Square, SQUARE.com/GO/openbook. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. So I got to put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind because I put everybody on the spot. So where is Bitcoin? It's 2030.
Yeah.
Let's say the government doesn't adopt the ideas in your book, or let's say they do, either or. But where's Bitcoin?
I don't know. I'd have to go look at the power law for that at that time frame. But I think in 2030, I mean, it's very hard to say, but I could see it anywhere between. I think Michael's number is 13 million a coin. I see it anywhere between 5 million and 25 million a coin. I mean,
5 years from now.
Yeah, million per coin. My view is that what will happen is ultimately we will. I think my kids and certainly my grandkids, your kids and grandkids will price things in satoshis. As for your listeners, the satoshi is the smallest unit within a Bitcoin. Each one Bitcoin is worth 100 million satoshis. So, and satoshi isn't even worth a penny right now, but it's that will change. And I think these other currencies are going to fail. I think it's inevitable. I mean, Safe says it best. It's when gunpowder came along, fighting with sticks and knives and swords didn't make sense anymore. And it's just a better form of money. I think it's going to replace, and by 2030, it's definitely going to replace all the others. Now, between here and there are going to be volatile periods up and down. It's got all the things related to it. And again, in your book, you did a great job of comparing it to Amazon, which I did in my book as well. Adopting these new things is volatile by definition.
So let's say the end of this year, Bitcoin.
Yeah. If I had to guess, just looking at the charts and doing kind of my financial analyst thing, I think we're at 140 at the end of this year. I mean, we kind of built a very nice base around the 50, 58 area. Well, the absolute bottom of the last correction off of FTX was 15,000. And, it tends to very often go up kind of 10x off its base. And so that would put us at 150,000 per coin. We also kind of went up from 58, we went up to 106, came back into the low 90s, mid 90s, and we formed a flag there, in my view, a technical term for that. And then the next leg up, I think, takes you to 146, 150, kind of this year. It's just a guess. I mean, I don't know, but I'm fairly confident that we'll get there. One of the things that will determine where it goes in the next year or two is the behavior of the government and the Federal Reserve. I mean, the book is called The Big Print. And that's because I think another big print is coming. And we've already had two big prints. We had one in 08 and we had one in 2020. And I think the math suggests that they're going to have to do another one and it's going to be bigger. And so, currencies fail and inflation occurs when the mass of people come to realize, you know what, this system is set up so that they can never stop printing. And as you know, I had a great pod with a guy the other day who grew up in Argentina, and he said, we saw our currency failing in 1990, and my parents would get paid. They'd rush to the grocery store to buy food because they knew a week later it would be more expensive. And that's what a currency failure looks like. We're not there yet, but we're behaving in ways that suggest that we're trending there. And what the policies they pursue, that'll determine what happens.
It's fascinating. It's I don't know how to say this. We've lived it. I didn't think we would see it in our lifetime, but we are seeing it. Michael Milken once said that all sovereign debt defaults.
Yes.
So I said, well, Michael, do you mean also the U.S.? And he got very pushed back. And then he said quietly, well, it's denominated in U.S. dollars, so you could just print the dollar and then you wouldn't default on the debt, right? So we end up paying back our debts with dollars that are worth less
correct
than the ones that we borrowed, right? And that's what's been going on forever. And I guess the question I have is, what is the cataclysm? Is it just a slow burn down to the bottom, Larry, or is there some type of cataclysm where people say, okay, whoa, I can't do this anymore?
That's a great question. That goes to kind of, the gradually and then suddenly. I actually think there's an accelerator at some point, that the pattern gets recognized by more and more people. And I've kind of alluded to it as being like a fire in a theater. Some people smell the smoke, and that's us. And we got out and we bought Bitcoin. Everyone else isn't aware there's smoke yet. But eventually, a lot of people become aware quickly. And you're actually seeing the beginnings of this in the acceleration in the price of gold. I mean, I'm a gold guy too. I'm a Bitcoiner through and through. Bitcoin's better than gold, but I still believe in gold. It's analog sound money. And what gold is telling us right now is, this fire, the smoke is getting more intense, right? I mean, gold is up 60% in the past year. It very rarely has done that, very rarely. And so to me, that's the beginning of kind of an alarm. And so to answer your question of does it just gradually burn forever? No, I think we kind of accelerate into a period where it really gets pretty bad and we get really high inflation and people realize there's a crisis. And what I hope is that we have enlightened enough leaders to do a currency reset and say we're going to a sound money standard. Because if we were to go all the way to hyperinflation, if you study those, that's really ugly. It tears a society apart.
Your book calls for a return to principles. That made America great, made America successful. What do you think those principles are, and how do we reconnect with those principles in a practical way?
I think it's a great question, and I think about it a lot. I think the principal documents of this country, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, are probably the greatest political documents that ever have been written by anybody. And I think the only thing that's wrong with this country is that we've strayed from the principles that are in those documents. And I would suggest that the biggest straying is, it was the system was meant to be set up to be fair for everybody. I think all Americans, nobody in America well, that's not true. Most Americans do not want handouts. Most Americans, all they want is a fair deal and a fair shake. I mean, we are a smart and aggressive, hardworking people in general, but we recognize unfairness when it exists. And sadly, the people in power and a lot of other folks have figured out ways to, make the system unfair. And we've got to return. And the monetary system is a perfect example of that. And the book lays out case after case of that. I mean, there's so many great, for instances, I apologize, somebody's outside blowing leaves off my lawn, but there's so many instances of it. I mean, one of the great ones, I don't know if you were able to read this anecdote, was in 2008, the chairman of one of the big investment banks' wife was able to borrow $220 million from the Federal Reserve, non-recourse, at 0% interest. Now, think about that. The average American, if they want to borrow money, they have to pay a credit card company 25%. And that's unfair in and of itself. I mean, we used to have usury laws where, the max rate on credit cards was, 10 or 11%. And, admittedly, some people couldn't get credit, fine. But, 25%, the mob would blush. So I think the idea of America is a fair system. And I know that my view of government is I don't want really government to do anything except enforce the laws and have courts and have jails. I want psychopaths and criminals and bad people to suffer for their behavior. But other than that, leave me alone. All the other stuff they do, I don't need it. I'm just not interested in
it. You sound like Doug Casey. Remember Doug Casey?
Yeah, I sure do. He's a friend. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I like Doug a lot. He had that whole libertarian vision that he articulated in crisis investing 45 years ago.
Exactly.
And I tell people, if we had gone with that, you would have tightened everything up. It's very hard to have a war if you can't deficit spend.
Right.
And so, and remember, America got in trouble with its first real unilateral war. Typically 250 years of history, U.S., we responded to attacks on the U.S., but we never unilaterally struck anybody. But with the Iraqi war, that was a unilateral strike by the Americans. It turned out that it to be one of the worst decisions that we've made in our history.
I agree.
And it mushroomed the deficit.
I totally agree.
If you had that Doug Casey fiscal discipline, you had to use gold to fight the war. You would have never gotten the war off. Okay, so I'm down to the 5 words. I've got 5 words for you, Larry.
Sure.
We culled these from your book. You are going to react to them. I'm going to say the words, and then you're going to give me a sentence or two, something that comes to your brain real quickly.
Sure.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
I say the monetary system. You say what?
I say fiat currency printed by the Federal Reserve and the government to benefit them and hurt the rest of us.
Right. And it's interesting. So I'm going to add a sentence there and see what you say to it. I would say, in addition to that, it has hurt living standards around the United States for lower.
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely gutted the middle class. And part of the reason I wrote this book was, and we're similar in age, I remember what this country used to be in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It was a much better country. Right. And I've watched people suffer as we, financialized and offshored all our industry. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, all the fentanyl and all the opioid crisis, et cetera. I mean, so many things have gone wrong. And, you and I, we've been, fairly financially comfortable because we've done well. But boy, half this country hasn't had that experience. Half this country has really gotten punched in the face for 20 years. And it's just wrong. I mean, and it's because the system is broken. It's because we're violating the principles in those founding documents. And the way to fix it, this is the part that's the reason I wrote the book. Most people don't understand that it's the monetary system that's doing it. You see these people. I mean, last year, I was watching a red-blue debate, and they were yelling at each other about all kinds of stuff that didn't matter. And I said to myself, these guys are arguing about the color of the drapes and the friggin' house is burning down because of the money system. So it was just crazy. We got to fix the money, right? Crazy. Yeah.
All right. I say the words I say the word inflation. You say what?
What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. We do not need inflation. Keynesians would tell you need inflation. You need 2% inflation. And if you don't have 2% inflation, you risk falling into a depression and, everything goes wrong. And that's just a complete and total lie. Because between 1789 and 1913, inflation, with the exception of wars, which you pointed out, and there's a good chart in the book that shows how each war created inflation. But if you didn't have wars, there was no inflation in that time frame. And the country did. I mean, it's not as if our living standards didn't advance enormously between 1789 and 1913. They did.
Okay. Well said. I'm going to leave that. What if I say the word gold?
Gold is analog sound money. It's been sound money for 5,000 years. Its supply is geologically determined. And prior to Bitcoin, it was the best form of money we had. You mentioned earlier countries defaulting, and we'll never default because we can print money. But if you print money to excess and you have hyperinflation, that's really a constructive default in real terms. And even Alan Greenspan admitted that gold is money par excellence. JP Morgan said the same thing. Gold is money, everything else is credit. Gold got us to the point where Bitcoin could be invented. Bitcoin is going to carry us over the finish line to return us to sound money, in my view.
Okay, what about the word Bitcoin?
Bitcoin will go down in history as one of the greatest technological inventions of mankind, in my opinion. similar to the invention of the internet. The distributed nature of the internet and the distributed nature of Bitcoin are changing the world, and they're taking. I mean, in my opinion, I'm spiritual. I know you're Catholic. I am too. They're almost God-given. I mean, we had this corrupt, sclerotic, huge system that could do stupid shit like Iraq because, Dick Cheney, wanted to get rich off his Halliburton stock, right? We had that kind of stuff. And decentralizing all of that power and all of those systems is going to save mankind from itself and is going to help the average citizen. And that's most important in my view.
Money.
Money is the most liquid good, according to Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian school. It's a collective illusion, really. It's what we all agree has value, and we use it to exchange with one another, the labor, the fruits of our labor. It should be sound. It should be limited in supply, or else it's not money. That's why, water, sand, certain things can't be money. And most commodities that get used up aren't good money. You need something that doesn't get used up, that has a supply that's either fixed or very controlled in its growth, like gold. And there are two pieces to it, as you and I both know. One is the means of exchange, which is just, you want to do deals and you want to buy things. And the other is you want to be able to save for your future and consume less than you produce, so that, if in the future you need to have something, you've got the savings to do so. And so money should hold its value over time. If it doesn't, it's immoral money. And, it's what we all transact in. And the thing that's so funny is that, the founding fathers knew this. It's in the Constitution. Gold and silver shall be money. They understood it clearly. My book lays it out. There are all kinds of examples. It's in the Bible that sound money is important. And yet, modernity and all our brilliance, we thought, well, Nixon just said, well, let's get rid of this gold standard. We don't need it. It's archaic. And the Keynesians convinced them to do that because it enhanced their power. And it was a mistake. It was a huge mistake. So.
Well, you've been incredible with your time here, and it's a phenomenal book in terms of understanding the monetary system and how to solve some of the global challenges that we're all facing today. The title of the book is the Big Print: What Happened to America and How Sound Money Will Fix It. And I'm very grateful to you. And also, it's a very colorful forward by Max Kaiser.
Yeah,
I do like your.
I'm very grateful to you, Anthony, just because my mission is to orange pill the world and to try and help people and to spread the word. And, I know the platform you have, the followers you have, the admirers you have, the contacts you have in the media and the press. And so I'll tell you how you can do me a solid back is help me spread the word on this thing. Thank you very much.
Joining us on an open book is Andrew Kurtzman. He is the author of Giuliani, The Rise and Tragic Fall of America's Mayor. And full disclosure, I've known Mayor Giuliani since 1989, so I have a 33-year relationship with the mayor. And, Andrew, I'm fond of the mayor. Now, I am distressed by what has happened to the mayor, frankly, and your book is a wonderful expose of the good and the bad of Mayor Giuliani. And I just want to say this up front, and I think you know this because you interviewed me for this book. I looked up to the mayor. And I have a lot of respect for him. And in your first book, you write about almost a different person. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But start by taking us back to when you, Andrew Kurtzman, first met Rudolph Giuliani in 1992.
Sure. I was the Giuliani reporter when New York One, New York's all news television news station, went on the air. And even before the first day that we broadcast, I had breakfast with Giuliani at the Waldorf Astoria. And he laid out why he would win his rematch with David Dinkins. And he was just a fascinating candidate from the beginning. Dinkins was an historic figure. He came into City Hall with a huge amount of excitement. It was the first Black mayor. But I think he got kind of tied up in what I'd call the paralysis of good intentions. There was just kind of this sclerotic way of dealing things or not dealing with things as the city was kind of falling apart. Giuliani came came out and said, said things that were just common sense, but were kind of considered heresy by the Democratic establishment, meaning there is no right to urinate in the street. There is no right to sleep in a subway car. Just like things that today sound like common sense, but back then were considered civil rights kind of red flags. And, he had no allegiance to the Democratic establishment, to liberal groups, to civil liberties groups, to the Black community. And that gave him a lot of license, political license, to crack some heads, so to speak.
So, and crack some heads he did. Did you like living in New York while he was mayor?
I mean, I've always loved living in New York. I'm born and raised here. But look, I mean, New York was facing nadir then. I mean, the streets were really out of control. The murder rate was high. Garbage was piled up in the streets. I mean, it was a city that had ceased to become governable, right? And one of the things that was so refreshing about Giuliani was that he proved to New York that New York City was governable, right? And it was, as a reporter, just watching him on a daily basis, stand as a solitary figure at City Hall against the tide of virtually every interest group in New York and hold fast and say, we're going to do this regardless of what you guys say. And then watch him kind of turn this city around was, as both a reporter and as a New Yorker, a really extraordinary thing to watch. And I don't want to kind of glamorize this because there was a huge downside to it as well, but we could get to that.
All right. Well, do we need that now, Andrew, in New York?
I think Eric Adams was elected under the same circumstances, right? Bill de Blasio was a very, left-leaning ideologue, right? While things started to fall apart. And I think New Yorkers decided we don't need ideology. We need someone to get the city under control.
Okay, so you're a very polite guy. So you're skirting the question. No, you're skirting the question. It's okay. You're allowed to skirt the question. You're a great author, but the truth of the matter is the city's an unmitigated disaster. And what works are Bloomberg and Giuliani-like policies, and it's actually fairer for everybody. Now, stop and frisks probably was a step too far. I think we all look back at that now and say that possibly that it was. But we need to make the city safer and cleaner. Otherwise, we're going to end up like a lot of these other urban nightmares that are pocking the United States. But let me go back for a second, okay? Because I wrote Mr. Giuliani. I think I mentioned this to you. I wrote him a check for $250 in 1989. I was Young Republicans for Rudolph Giuliani. He was unsuccessful in that race, but I supported him again in 1993. I was slightly less younger, but at 29, sort of still young. And he won in 93, which was transformative for me. And so I'm always going back to that era of Giuliani. He did have a divot in his mayoral administration in 2001. Take us back for a second, because he was roundly unpopular in, let's call it, August of 2001.
It's a common misperception about what kind of political shape Giuliani was in before 9/11, right? I think the conventional wisdom, fed by a lot of kind of misleading media stories, has it that Giuliani was kind of, but a very unpopular politician, and the city couldn't wait to get rid of him at the time. It's just not true. I mean, a few months earlier in that year, his popularity plummeted during the Patrick Dorismond affair. It was, someone who was an innocent man who was killed by police. Giuliani mishandled the situation, and his numbers plummeted. By September of 2001, Giuliani's popularity was over 50%, which, as a political professional, it is fine for an incumbent, especially someone who's been in office for 8 years, right? So I think that's been overstated a bit. But big picture, was the city kind of ready to move on from Giuliani after 8 years of bombast? I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. There's a quote at the start of the book, which I love. Okay. And he has said this, by the way, and I know this for certain. I don't care about my legacy. I'll be dead. Now, I've heard him say it. Okay. So I know he has said it.
Right.
And I'm sure you've referenced it from other people that have heard him say that. Do you believe that about the mayor? Do you believe he doesn't care about his legacy, that he'll be dead?
I do believe that. I do believe
so
that. For one thing, it kind of it's the kind of subtext to why he didn't cooperate with me for this book. I mean, I emphasized to him numerous times that this, no one else was writing a biography of you. This is it. This is what's going to live in history. If you want this book to be accurate and to, reflect your views, this is the time. And, his feeling was, I don't care. And so I think that goes to the heart of the Giuliani story. And I write about this extensively in my book, which is his sense of moral certitude, that he's right and everyone else is wrong. And, it served him well during his mayoralty, as I said, when, the political forces were all against him and he stood his ground, but was catastrophic for his really terrible decisions that led his career astray and eventually damaged the country. I mean, to this day, he's this kind of fanatic about Joe Biden being corrupt. He's still defending the notion that the election was stolen from Trump, and he feels he's right and everyone's wrong. And that got him into trouble and got the country into great trouble.
When do you think he stopped caring, Andrew?
Stop caring about
his legacy.
About his legacy. It's a good question.
I don't care. Yeah.
Right. I think somewhere along the line after 2016, when Trump became president and the criticism of Giuliani snowballed, there was a sense again of, screw him, right? I'm on the side of morality. I'm on the side of truth. And, the humiliations just piled up, right? The Borat film, the hair dye press conference, right? The Four Seasons press conference. He would go on television and make kind of a fool of himself, in any number of those bombastic interviews with Chuck Todd and, Andrew Cuomo, Chris Cuomo. He just stopped caring what the world believed about him.
Yeah, and look, it's very tragic for me. He was a famous prosecutor in the 80s, the most famous mayor in the 90s, a hero to many people, Time Magazine's Man of the Year after 9/11. But yet, and this is something you write beautifully about, there was always a conflict in there somewhere. There was always a struggle for his personal identity. Why is that, you think? And then when do you think he really started spiraling?
I think it's another good question. I think that Giuliani has always kind of been at war with the two sides of his personality, right? He's at war between the instinct to do the right thing and the instinct to preserve himself politically and advance himself politically. You saw it innumerable times during his mayoralty, right? When he came to the aid of the victims of that plane crash and, stood up to the head of the TWA. And any number of occasions where he really stood up for his people. And those were those were great instincts on his part. But he made so many self-interested moral compromises, right? Ranging from selling out after 9/11, right? Opening that consulting firm and trading on his America's mayor's name, to endorsing Donald Trump. And Trump, according to one of Giuliani's closest aides, Giuliani in 2016 thought of Trump as a carnival barker. And yet Trump was the only person knocking on his door. Giuliani had already crashed and burned in the 2008 presidential race. He really had no political future until Donald Trump came along. And then it was just one moral compromise after another throughout the Trump presidency. I mean, now, Giuliani always considered himself a moral man. In fact, that's kind of key to his personality, that he was always on the side of morality. But there's nothing moral left about him. Everything he does now has kind of a quality of immorality.
Okay, so that's my greatest sadness, right? Because ultimately, when I was looking up to the mayor, I was like, ultimately, this guy is making right or wrong decisions in a principled sort of a way.
Right.
And now later in his life, he's just making impetuous decisions that have no basis on any of those principles. So this is why I find your book so fascinating, because you go into his career, you go into his life, and there seems to be this ambiguity or this two-sidedness to him. And it's tragic to me, Andrew. I'm just talking to you very candidly. It's tragic to me.
It is tragic. I mean, that's part of that's the subtitle to my book. It is a tragic story. It is a tragic story.
There's no question about that. There was a time where if you had asked me who was going to be the 2008 nominee for the Republican Party, I would have said Rudolph Giuliani. Of course, I got that wrong. He was the front runner for the entire year for president in the Republican primary.
That's right.
Before it went downhill. It is another great rise and fall story. Can you go into that a little bit? What were some of the lowest moments after that race, which you beautifully detail in the book?
Thank you. Well, it was one of the most kind of jaw-dropping revelations that I learned in the course of reporting this book. That I spoke extensively with Judith Giuliani, who was Rudy's wife at the time, enormously polarizing figure in Giuliani's world, had effectively separated him from all of his advisors, all of his friends. There was a constant war between the two. Very, very bright, very perceptive, but manipulative. And she told me a story about the weeks and months after Giuliani dropped out of the 2008 race, right? So he drops out in the end of January 2008. It is the end of his political career, the end of his dreams of becoming the first Italian Catholic president. He's now tarnished his 9/11 halo. His financial potential, his earnings potential has now dropped because he's no longer he's kind of shot his chance of, becoming president. Now he's kind of a political loser. And he falls into a depression. He starts to drink. Judy moves him to Florida, to her parents' house. The press finds out. And who takes him under his wing but Donald Trump? And Donald Trump opens up the doors to Mar-a-Lago, and Judith and Rudy move into Mar-a-Lago for over a month. She tells a story of his falling down constantly, being in what she called a clinical depression. She's a former nurse. She is prone to exaggeration, as I wrote, but there are enough people in Giuliani's orbit who confirm kind of his state of mind at the time to make a very persuasive case that if she wasn't telling 100% of the story, she was telling close to it.
I know her. I know obviously there's tension and struggle between the two of them now, but I actually know her a long period of time. And so there's distress there for me too. You walk up to people on the street after 2001, super unambivalent about Mayor Giuliani. Most people say, okay, give the guy his due, help pull the city together, a great leader. You walk in New York City today, I think one of the most glaring things for me was on the 21st anniversary of the September 11th tragedy, the mayor is not standing there with the other dignitaries. He's glaringly absent. And so,
Right.
what's the opinion of the mayor in New York City, in your opinion, today?
He's an enormously unpopular politician, and I think that the biggest proof of that was the candidacy of his son, Andrew Giuliani, for governor, right? And Rudy Giuliani, was just joined at the hip with his son, who was making this absolutely ludicrous effort to become governor with zero experience. But Giuliani made this almost a referendum on him, right? Andrew had no experience. He had no qualifications at all and seemed perfectly happy to let Giuliani become kind of the face of the campaign, let people vote based upon whether they loved him or not. And Andrew lost by 20 points. I mean, Giuliani in much of New York, not all of New York, but much of New York, is a radioactive figure, is someone who is kind of a figure of ridicule, also almost a figure of embarrassment, right? New Yorkers elected him to 2 terms. On the other hand, there were precincts of New York where he campaigned, the more conservative areas, Staten Island, where Rudy was still greeted as a hero. I think a lot of people still have a lot of gratitude towards him for what he did for New York on 9/11.
I know you're objective. I know you're a journalist. You get paid to be objective. Is it painful for you?
I am a journalist, and how I feel about it is not really important. So I'm going to skirt that question just a little. What I will say is this. I was with Giuliani on the morning of September 11th.
It's painful for me, Andrew. I just pointing that out. I'm just curious. Okay, I don't want to interrupt you. You were with him on September 11th. Yep.
I was with him on 9/11. I experienced that morning with him. I ran from the explosion of the second tower with him. I watched him display magnificent leadership. We were all scared to death. We were covered in sweat as we were kind of making this nomadic trip up Church Street, trying to find a location to take control of this, anarchic situation. I mean, they didn't even have a car. Right, we had to walk a mile just to, find this small firehouse near Houston Street, where someone got a crowbar to try to jimmy open the lock to the firehouse, just so he could find some place to run the city. He was the calmest person in the bunch. He was enormously eloquent, as you know, and so, for me to watch kind of Giuliani then and Giuliani now is, obviously a very kind of harrowing contrast, right? As a New Yorker, it's disappointing. How I feel about it emotionally, well, I can tell my family members.
He said something to me, and that he was reading Roy Jenkins's book Churchill. It was a biography that was on his nightstand. Right. About Churchill's backbone and his principles during the war, May 1940, when that war was breaking out and there was a panic overtaking the city of London. Now Churchill remained steadfast and calm, and he was really trying to channel that energy during 9/11, which of course you and I both know that he did. Yep. Let's go to Donald Trump for a second, because you also say in the book that in some ways Giuliani created the template for the Trump presidency.
Sure.
Trump admired Giuliani. We both know that. He admired the way he ran the city. You mentioned the fact that they got close after the presidential candidacy debacle.
Right.
Elaborate on that for us. What did you learn about the relationship between these two men while writing this book?
Sure. Well, I mean, going back to the 90s, Donald Trump was a developer who had, not a lot of sophistication about politics. He was a developer, and what he knew about politics and government were what served him, right? He needed zoning approvals, right? He needed the buildings department kind of approvals for his projects, but he was not a politically sophisticated person. And all he probably knew about politics was what he read in the New York Post every morning. But Giuliani was up there making this great impression upon the entire public. And if you listen to Trump now, he he describes Giuliani always with these terms of glowing respect. And aides, I mean, you would know this better than I was. You were inside the Oval Office, but aides I spoke with said that he reserved this certain level of respect in the way he spoke about people, really to just kind of one person, right? He spoke about Giuliani unlike what he spoke about, how he spoke about other people. Sorry about mixing this all up, but he had a lot of respect for Giuliani. And according to the White House aides I spoke with, he admired Giuliani's take no prisoners approach to the mayoralty, his bombast, his war with the press, his failure, his refusal to ever apologize, the fact that he would be, sadistic with his political opponents. And this was the template for Trump. Giuliani was Trump before there was Trump.
I totally agree. I love that aspect of the book. Andrew Giuliani. Let's talk about him for a second, okay? Because I like Andrew. It's fair to say that nobody knows Mayor Giuliani better than Andrew. Something that people don't realize about that relationship.
Well, they've had a very fraught relationship. They're obviously on very good terms now, but Judith caused a major schism in Rudy's relationship with his children, right? They didn't speak. Andrew and Caroline didn't speak to their father for years because they detested Judith so much. They, just like everyone else, they considered her enormously manipulative and also kind of threatened by them. Watching Andrew kind of bond or rebond once again with his father during his race for governor was kind of a level of kind of psychodrama that you don't really see on a political stage. Like watching him work through his feelings towards his father and watching his father work through his feelings towards his son was probably the only fascinating thing about Andrew's race for governor. They're they're father and son, and every family has this dysfunction. But the difference is they played it out, before the cameras.
Yeah, and some of it obviously painful for me to watch. Again, this is an obscure fact, but I actually hired Andrew at the White House. I mean, he would have gotten the job anyway, but he was
interesting. Okay,
he was supposed to work for me in the OPL area, and then of course Priebus dislodged me from that position, which was fine. But Andrew ended up staying in the position for 4 years. All right, I want to have a little bit of fun with you, if you don't mind. Okay. I'm launching this astrology NFT. And so we've done some work here in my firm on astrology, okay? And we've done a little research on you, okay? I'm born on the 6th of January, so I'm a Capricorn. My team is telling me that you're born on the 24th of April. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're a Taurus. Not that you probably know anything about astrology, but you're supposed to be stubborn and very down to earth.
I can't imagine anyone would think of me in those terms.
Okay, all right. But Mr. Giuliani was born on the 28th of May in 1944. So he's a Gemini. And so the profile of the Gemini, you're smiling, is a split personality. That there are two sides to the person, and there's a good side and a bad side. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump is also a Gemini.
Okay.
So before I let you go, tell me one thing about the good side of Mayor Giuliani and one thing about the bad side.
He was very, very loyal to his friends, very loyal to his aides, fatherly towards the people who worked under him. He was very thoughtful in his decision making. This is kind of the Giuliani of the 90s I'm referring to. One of the interesting experiences I had in writing this book was trying to, at first, kind of pry these people open in terms of their cooperation. And for the first year, I mean, I spent 3 or 4 years writing this book. The first year, it was hard to get his old days to talk about him. And this is despite the fact that the vast majority are completely embarrassed by him now. But there's so much loyalty towards him for the old days. He was their father figure. They loved him. They respected him. I mean, that was the depth of the loyalty and how well he treated them. So that was the good side of Giuliani. The bad side of Giuliani was the person who would fabricate the Ukraine scandal, who would try to overturn a democratic election, who would use false information in testifying before the Georgia legislature, who would do anything to win, even if it meant overturning a democratic election, damaging the country. I mean, it's, as I said, it's immoral. It's immoral.
It makes me very, very sad. I don't think there's anybody other than a family member, perhaps, that knows him better than you. So what is something that people don't realize about Mayor Giuliani?
Well, one of the most interesting revelations to me was this psychiatrist's report about his father, right? Wayne Barrett, the wonderful investigative reporter who's no longer with us, revealed years ago that Harold Giuliani, Giuliani's father, had gone to prison for robbing a milkman. He was an enforcer for a mobbed up uncle of Giuliani's, carried a baseball bat, right, broke kneecaps. But there was a report on Harold shortly before he was sentenced by a court-appointed psychiatrist who diagnosed Harold as a pathological deviant, someone who had no concern for other people's feelings, right? The fact that Rudy Giuliani, grew up in a household with a figure like that, someone prone to violence, someone who didn't care about other people's feelings, is something that really you have to think about when you wonder what went wrong for Rudy Giuliani, right? His mother, Helen, was a very disciplined, loving, doting mother, but who was also almost impossible to please. So the net of that childhood was that Giuliani set out in the world determined to prove himself at all costs. I think what we've seen has borne that out. I'm so glad I asked the question because it's such a fascinating answer. And of course, if you study Greek tragedy, in the house of Atreus, does something very diabolical, and Zeus says the sins of the father of Atreus will be casted down upon his descendants. And so it's a metaphor for people do mimic their parents, and they do go through their parents' struggles. There's almost like an emotional inheritance that comes from family trauma or personalities in a family. And it's almost as if Mayor Giuliani, in his desperate attempt to escape that, the stuff that you describe about Harold Giuliani, somehow he fell back into some of those elements. Is that fair to say? Sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you need a psychiatrist as much as a journalist to understand Rudy Giuliani. I mean, his whole career has been one continuing psychodrama, from his cheating on his wives to, his these horrible, immoral choices he made along the way, to his relationship with his family, to his kind of dysfunctional relationship with Donald Trump, right? I mean, the man's psychology is, part of the fun of being a reporter, trying to understand this guy.
Well, I so greatly appreciate you coming on. The title of the book is Giuliani, The Rise and Tragic Fall of America's Mayor. It's by Andrew Kurtzman. I really appreciate you being on an open book with me today. And I'm encouraging everybody to read the book because there's a lot in there, not only about his personality, but it's a story about life. And it's a story about the vectors and the places that life can take you if, frankly, you're not careful.
Well said. Thank you for having